listen closely. There's a pulse underneath everything tonight, a quiet thunder humming beneath the surface of your thoughts. You feel it, don't you? That subtle tightening in the air, that shift in the atmosphere that makes your skin prickle like someone just whispered a secret directly into your bloodstream. The world is behaving strangely, almost as if something invisible tilted its axis just a few degrees, and deep inside, you already know the truth. That tilt has everything to do with you, because somewhere in the high towers of influence, behind closed doors and frosted glass, a symbolic number has been stamped onto your existence. 50 million. Not in currency, no. Money is too small a vessel to carry what you represent. It's a valuation, a measurement, a desperate attempt to quantify what they cannot control. They call it a bounty because they lack the vocabulary to describe the panic you've ignited. But you and I both know it's not a target. It's a confession. The world doesn't place a symbolic 50 million price tag on silence. It places it on disruptions, on anomalies, on forces so unpredictable that institutions can feel their old blueprints dissolving just by whispering your name. And whisper it they do, not out of admiration, out of necessity, out of fear, out of fascination, out of that deep, instinctive recognition that you've stepped out of the predictable linear script they wrote for you. You've done something far more destabilizing than breaking rules. You've exposed them. You didn't challenge the hierarchy with fists or fire. You challenged it with your existence, your unpredictability, your refusal to shrink yourself into a box with a neat label. And that alone has shaken their order more violently than any rebellion could. Picture it, a room full of analysts, experts, strategists, advisors, people who made careers pretending they understand everything hunched over glowing screens, replaying your movements like they're decoding encrypted transmissions. They analyze your silences, your pauses, the way your eyes shift, the rhythm of your breathing. They don't study you because you're dangerous. They study you because you're unclassifiable, and nothing terrifies a system more than something it can't categorize. They write reports layered with jargon, graphs, psychological theories, and still they can't predict your next step. That unpredictability is your rebellion. That unknowability is your revolution. Meanwhile, the critics sharpen their tongues like symbolic blades. They disguise themselves as commentators, skeptics, opportunists, each trying to capture you through narrative, through opinion, through distortion. They think if they can define you, they can contain you. If they can label you, they can limit you. If they can criticize you loud enough, they can drown you out. But every attempt to hold you still only makes your shadow stretch wider. Because you don't fight them, you don't argue, you don't defend. And that silence, your silence, is the greatest psychological strike they've ever suffered. To them, your silence is not emptiness, it's resistance, it's defiance. It's evidence that their frameworks, their rules, their logic are flimsy when confronted by someone who doesn't play the game they designed, so they escalate. They amplify the symbolic bounty to 50 million, hoping someone, somewhere, can capture you. But who are these hunters they're calling? Not assassins in the literal sense, no. In this psychological battlefield, hunters are the opinion chasers, the gossip spreaders, the narrative manipulators, the opportunists who salivate at the chance to exploit your rising myth. They come at you through microphones, through comments, through headlines, through half-truths, through artificial narratives crafted in panic rooms. They aim not to harm you physically, but to pin you down with interpretations, to reduce your complexity to a headline, to shrink your presence into a trope. But every time they try to dissect you, they cut themselves instead. Because in their desperation to expose you, They expose their own motives, envy, insecurity, obsession, fear. They reveal how threatened they are by anyone who refuses to live as a predictable footnote. And while they scramble, the people whisper. Whispers turn to conversations, conversations turn to debates, debates turn to fascination. Your name becomes a cultural tremor that shakes across cities, families, social circles. Some admire you, some resent you, some try to imitate you. But all of them, every last one, feels the vibration of your presence humming under the surface of their day. It spreads like resonance, a sound that wasn't supposed to echo this far, but refuses to stop traveling. The media catches on. They magnify you, they twist you, they glorify you, they distort you, they argue about you with such intensity that it becomes obvious they're not trying to understand you, they're trying to survive you. Because the moment a person becomes too influential to ignore, the world rearranges itself around them. And that is what you've done. You've become rearrangement, you've become cultural gravity. You've become the tremor beneath their narratives. You've become the shadow they can't outrun. And the symbolic 50 million? That number is less about your worth and more about their fear. It's the world's way of admitting, we cannot contain this, we cannot predict this, we cannot control this. They think the number defines you, they don't realize it defines them. Because what kind of system slaps a 50 million symbolic value on a person just for existing outside the script? A system on the edge, a system terrified of collapse, a system painfully aware that one unpredictable individual is enough to expose decades of illusion. And every time someone tries to capture your essence, whether through criticism, imitation, manipulation, or intellectual deconstruction, they fail. And their failure becomes another chapter in your myth. That's why your reputation has grown beyond your own actions. It has become self-sustaining. You don't spread yourself, they spread you. Every attempt to minimize you becomes an advertisement. Every attempt to contain you becomes momentum. Every attempt to silence you becomes a megaphone. You've become the idea they can't bury, the question they can't answer, the variable they can't solve, the mirror they can't face. And here's the most poetic part. You didn't choose this. You didn't crown yourself. You didn't ask for the symbolic bounty. It was placed on you because the world needed a symbol for everything it fears and everything it envies. You became the storm, not by force, but by existence. You became the tremor, not by destruction, but by resonance. You became the myth, not by effort, but by inevitability. And now the number grows louder. 50 million, 50 million, 50 million. A chant wrapped in desperation. A confession disguised as a warning. A declaration that the world has identified the one thing it cannot control and is begging anyone to define it, categorize it, neutralize it. But you cannot be defined. You cannot be categorized. You cannot be neutralized. You are beyond their language. You are beyond their predictions. You are beyond their systems. And that is why the narrator, this voice that sees through the walls of reality, leans in now, whispering the truth that the world refuses to admit out loud. The 50 million isn't a threat, it's proof. Proof that you've crossed the threshold where influence becomes inevitability. Proof that your presence is too large for the old world to swallow. Proof that the systems built on hierarchy, obedience, and predictability quiver when confronted by someone who doesn't bow to them. You've become the myth they cannot erase, a symbol they cannot silence, an echo they cannot outrun. And the 50 million? It's simply the world's way of saying, we see you, we fear you, we cannot define you, we cannot stop you. You are no longer a name, you are the tremor beneath their certainty. You are the resonance in their silence. You are the myth they will spend eternity trying and failing to contain. You feel it, don't you? That quiet shift in the world's posture once your name slipped beyond containment and started circulating like a rumored prophecy. They wanted the story to end at that truth, to freeze the narrative before it grew any sharper, any louder, any more undeniable. But narratives like yours do not stop on command. They metastasize. They seep into new corners. They grow teeth in the dark. And the moment you cross that invisible threshold from person to phenomenon, the world found itself reorganizing around you without your permission, because the truth they cannot bury always grows roots, and those roots have already begun cracking through their marble floors. You might think the 50 million pinned onto your existence was meant as a threat, some theatrical declaration of resistance from the systems that once claimed dominance. But you know better. You can feel the tremor beneath the surface, the kind that doesn't shake buildings, but shakes beliefs, the kind that doesn't topple governments, but topples illusions, the kind that doesn't break bones, but breaks narratives. This isn't a number, it's an admission, a confession. A nervous handshake between crumbling institutions saying, "We've lost control of the story." Because a story like yours doesn't stay still. It doesn't sit politely in the corner waiting to be interpreted. It spreads across airwaves and dinner tables and sleepless nights. It infects the minds of those who once thought they were untouchable. It forces a planet built on old frameworks to adjust itself or risk collapsing under its own outdated architecture. And so, the bounty, as they call it, isn't a hunt. It's a coping mechanism, a desperate attempt to make sense of something they can no longer categorize, no longer predict, no longer file neatly into a system that was already cracking long before you stepped into the spotlight. They call it a price. But it's a mirror. It reflects their fear, not your danger. It reflects their instability, not your threat. Because you didn't destroy anything. You revealed what was already broken. You didn't dethrone anyone. You exposed the throne for its hollowness. You didn't command the world's attention. Its attention drifted toward you because everything else felt too small, too fragile, too predictable to matter anymore, and that's what terrifies them the most. Not your presence, but the absence you create in everything else. The way their old gods, old leaders, old structures start to look flimsy when compared to the gravity you now carry. The way their traditions feel outdated next to the myth you've become. The way their institutions whisper about you like a storm they can hear on the horizon but cannot measure with their instruments. Because storms are predictable, you are not. And predictability is the only currency they ever truly trusted. So now they scramble, but their scrambling only feeds the myth. Analysts dissect your interviews, your pauses, your silences, your choices not to respond. Commentators turn your expressions into theories. Experts build entire careers trying to decode you, failing publicly but pretending they're making progress. Critics sharpen their opinions, not realizing their criticisms only enlarge your silhouette. Followers multiply because the world loves what it cannot define. Doubters multiply because doubt is their last shield against awe. And through all of it, your name becomes a current, a tide, a gravitational pull, dragging the globe into a new psychological alignment. This is the part they didn't anticipate. The myth grows whether you speak or stay silent. Silence acts like gasoline. Every absence becomes presence. Every rumor becomes scripture. Every misunderstanding becomes momentum. And while they cling to their fragile frameworks, something even more dangerous yet entirely symbolic begins to unfold. People start reimagining themselves through you. They start questioning the structures that once held them in place. They start wondering why your rise felt inevitable and theirs felt impossible. They start reshaping their worldview around the idea that boundaries are illusions and influence doesn't need permission. You didn't ask to become their symbol, but symbols don't need consent. They emerge. They evolve. They anchor themselves in the subconscious of a species searching for meaning. And you unwillingly, unknowingly, unintentionally became one. This is why the 50 million is more than a number. It is a social earthquake, a psychological artifact, a cultural confession. The world is saying, loudly and publicly, we cannot contain what you've become. And that admission alone destabilizes everything built on the fantasy of control. Watch how they react now. Influencers try to mimic your cadence, hoping to bottle the phenomenon. They can't. Your cadence wasn't learned, it was forged. Politicians try to reframe your ascent as a cautionary tale, but their voices crack under the weight of their trembling narratives. Corporations scramble to avoid your name on their stock reports because every mention causes unpredictable shifts. Journalists obsessively track trends tied to your identity, terrified they'll miss the next cultural aftershock. Families argue at kitchen tables, trying to interpret you, projecting their own fears and desires into the obsessively tracked trends. Your silhouette. Youth copy you not because they understand you, but because they feel the tremor of your myth and want to align themselves with the frequency of inevitability. And inevitability, that's the word they fear the most. Systems can fight threats, they can censor rebellion, they can suppress dissent, but inevitability, that is untouchable. Because inevitability isn't an action, it's a narrative, a collective belief, a cultural instinct that whispers, this can't be stopped. You became that whisper. And now institutions scramble, acting like symbolic hunters, not with weapons, but with think pieces, psychological profiles, strategic briefings, public campaigns, rebranding attempts, emergency meetings, panels of experts debating your influence, each one believing they're closing in on you, when in reality, they're just orbiting your gravity. The more they study you, the more mysterious you become. The more they analyze you, the more unpredictable you appear. The more they try to simplify you, the more complex your shadow grows. Every attempt to capture your meaning only expands it. And slowly, something else begins to dawn on them quietly at first. Then all at once, like an inconvenient sunrise. They realize they never placed a bounty on your head. They placed a bounty on their fear. Because fear needs a target. Fear needs a symbol. Fear needs a shape it can blame for shaking the walls. And in naming you, they inadvertently crowned you. This is how myths are born. Not from greatness, from panic. Not from heroism, from destabilized systems searching for an explanation. Not from effort, from the desperate attempt to control a narrative slipping through trembling fingers. And now, look at what has happened. Your name has become a quiet rebellion woven into the fabric of global conversation. Your reputation has become a compass, pointing to everything they tried to bury under silence. Your influence has become a mirror, forcing the world to confront the gaps in its own identity. You are not dangerous, you're inconvenient. You're the proof that the old rules don't work anymore. And the old world hates being proven obsolete. This is why the 50 million hangs in the air like an omen, not because it threatens you, but because it exposes them. It exposes their fear of losing control. It exposes their inability to define you. It exposes their wish that your rise was an exception instead of a prophecy. Because if you can slip through the cracks, others might follow. If you can rewrite the narrative, others might dare to do the same. If you can become a phenomenon, others might realize they don't have to stay invisible. Your myth is contagious, and they know it. That's the real reason behind the price tag. It's not a hunt, it's a warning to others. Don't become like you. But warnings only work when people are afraid, and right. Now, they're not afraid of becoming you. They're afraid of being left behind by you. The institutions tremble, the systems creak, the power holders whisper. The old world shivers under the weight of your name. Because they finally understand what part one ended with. You are a truth they can't bury, and now that truth is spreading. And now the world reaches the point they feared most, the moment where the whispers about you stop being whispers and start becoming scripture. Because once a truth spreads far enough, once a name echoes long enough, once a myth anchors deep enough, it stops belonging to the systems that tried to contain it and begins belonging to the people who carry it. You can feel that shift, can't you? That quiet surrender in the air. That reluctant respect slipping into their tone when they mention you. That uneasy fascination in the way they watch, study, imitate, repeat. They still pretend they're in control of the narrative, of perception, of the story being written around you. But control is a fragile illusion, and illusions cannot survive the weight of inevitability. The world doesn't move toward you anymore. It orbits you, and orbit is not loyalty. Orbit is gravity. Orbit is acknowledgement. Orbit is proof that your presence has become a center point in a system that once denied you even a corner. The so-called 50 million price has now evolved past meaning. It's no longer a symbolic bounty. It's a badge on the chest of the world, their confession that they failed to categorize you, failed to predict you, failed to silence the ripple effect your identity triggered. Because what they called a price became a spotlight. What they imagined as suppression became amplification. What they framed as a warning became a declaration of cultural momentum. And momentum never stops for the comfort of those who fear it. You didn't choose to become the phenomenon they chase, but the phenomenon chose you the moment the world realized your existence wasn't aligned with their old equations. Your unpredictability became a language. Your insight became a map. Your refusal to bend became a signal fire for everyone who once lived inside boundaries they never questioned. And that's the part they cannot admit. You shook the foundation not by shouting, not by forcing, not by breaking anything, but simply by being the one thing their frameworks weren't built to handle. Unrestricted potential. They talk about you in boardrooms now. They whisper your name in classrooms. They analyze your influence in psychological studies. Some admire you, some hate you. Most don't know what to feel, and that emotional confusion is exactly why your myth thrives. Because myths are born from the world's inability to define something it cannot ignore, and that's the stage you've reached. You're no longer a threat. You're a reference point, a standard, a cultural pulse, a gravitational center the world unconsciously calibrates itself around. Every commentator dissecting you becomes part of your chorus. Every critic arguing against you becomes an amplifier for your signal. Every rumor mutating your story becomes another branch in the mythology the world is writing around your silhouette. And now, the final truth settles over them like dusk. The price was never meant to diminish you. It was meant to comfort them. A way to tell themselves, we still have agency, we can still define him, we can still contain what he is becoming. But they can't. Because you're no longer becoming. You are a symbol of unfiltered influence, a disruption they can't reverse, a phenomenon they can't control, a myth they can't rewrite, and myths, once awakened, do not return to sleep. So remember this as the world continues to spin with your name stitched into its rhythm. The 50 million wasn't a threat, it was a surrender. A public admission from crumbling systems that your reputation has grown beyond their reach, beyond their comprehension, beyond their ability to silence. You are not being hunted, you are being recognized. And recognition once earned on this scale becomes the one thing even time struggles to erase. You wanted truth, you became it. You wanted clarity, you embodied it. You wanted a voice. You evolved into an echo the world cannot unhear, and now your legacy marches forward, not as a warning, not as a rebellion, but as a permanent fixture in the world's psychological landscape, a myth with a pulse, a phenomenon with a name, a truth no institution